LEDs, it's nice and bright. And tapping doesn't work very well. So another thing about light is, even though your light may be flashing, make sure it works. It's just bright, that's all it is. But yeah, I realized how great, how wonderful light really was when I was in the darkness, just lost. You feel helpless, you feel alone. I'm thinking here too, as we see light. I remember one time I was going in the caves. I used to live in Redding, California, which is the biggest city north of Sacramento, which is not big at all. That's where I went to college, and there were like caverns and caves in there. And then stupid things I used to do when I was in college too, driving at night with my headlights off, which is dumb. Don't do it. But you have this sense of fear that's there too. You turn on the lights, you're just like, whoa, thank God, I can see what's there, I can see what's in front of me, I can see my path. So light, there are so many connotations of light. Just think about it. Light. We think sunlight, we think moonlight, we think all these other lights that guide us in the path. If we don't have it, we get lost. Now let's turn to John chapter 8. And let's just see what Jesus says. John chapter 8, verses 20, verses 12. Funny thing today was I was reading through the passage and I was looking at Luke chapter 8. The funny thing is it does talk about life there as well. But John chapter 8. John chapter 8, verse 12. When Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Now remember this passage right here, let me give you a little background. Jesus is at a huge festival. And people are coming together, they're coming down to the town. The church leaders are there. Political situation back there. Remember, Jesus was during the Roman Empire. Any of you guys study history? Have studied history, world history? Raise your hand proudly. Let's see more. Okay, I'm not going to ask you questions, don't worry. I love studying history. Just to give you a side note why it's so important for us to study history, because everything in history, it ties in somewhere with the Christian church, all the way up to the Renaissance period as well. And it's just so cool to be able to picture things left and right. But anyways, that was during Roman rule. Rome was ruling over Israel at the time. And you had leaders in there, but then again, the Israelites had religious systems. There were people who were tired of being oppressed or oppressed by their governments and over rules. So it's a really, big tension spot. Jesus comes in. It's like a powder keg. He's coming in and he's pretty much, just shaking everything up. And so right here when he was talking, there's passages in this section where he talks to Jewish leaders and just throws them off. Now Jewish leaders had the power to do a lot of things back then. And so they were in control at the time. The Romans were in control. The Romans didn't like the Jewish leaders. The Jewish leaders didn't like the Romans. And so you imagine, not to say that this was going to happen, but really after Jesus left, they took siege to Jerusalem and destroyed it. But it's interesting. Jesus comes in right at the peak of this revolution. He comes in and he starts saying all these things. Now you also remember, Caesar was considered what? You guys know those who study history? He was considered a living God. So remember, when Jesus comes here, he defies not only the Jewish rule, but he kicks himself. Or he actually, he really hurts himself, I guess, in his plan. But he went against Rome as well. So he calls himself, when Jesus spoke again, he goes, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but he will have the light of the life. You read the next verse, the Pharisees challenged him. And then he goes on to talk about who is your witness, who is your authority. And so we see throughout the Bible, or we see in this passage that Jesus is saying, I am the light. And again, he's going back to Genesis, and he's going back to John chapter 1. If you look at John, John talks so much about the light, about Jesus being that light, about him being the way, about him being the Logos. In the beginning there was the Word. It's amazing. Live as children of light. In a sense, for this verse, we're talking about living as children of Christ, God's children. That's really where it's at. So I want to give you that foundation. Living as children of light is living in the light of Christ. But when you turn to Ephesians chapter 5, and this is where the thrust of everything goes, actually Ephesians chapter 4 and 5, you'll see everything else is there. And so let's turn to Ephesians. We're going to take some time to read through this, and I'm going to break it down for you. Let's check it out. First part of Ephesians 4, talking about the unity of the body of Christ, sticking together, working together, great stuff. Next part. Verse 17, chapter 4, verse 17. So if you have your Bibles, we look there. If you don't, just listen along. So I tell you this, and insist on it, that the Lord, that you must not no longer live as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their thinking. They are darkening their understanding and separated from the light of God because of their ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts. Talk about mind and heart. I want you to remember those two words, mind and heart. These are the two vital aspects for any human being to get things done in life. And everything that comes to the mind comes through a few things. Our senses, our touch, especially in a big way, our sight and our hearing. So keep that in mind as you see this right here. Having lost all their sensitivity, this is verse 19, they've given themselves over to sensuality, so as to indulge in every kind of impurity with a continual lust for more. Let me read that to you again. Having lost all sensitivity, they have given themselves over to sensuality. And that is giving yourself over to feelings, to touch. Whatever feels good, do it. There's nothing to hold back. When I want something, I get it. Back in the old days, people would have to save money, or, it's not all about the feelings, it's about the thought as well. Again, thought, mind, and heart not working together here. And so really back then, Paul's situation, right, to the church in Ephesus, not too far away from where we're at right now. So they indulge themselves in every kind of impurity, which we have a lot these days too. But a continual lust for more. Impurity and more. And when I think of the word more, I look at how my situation is in my town. To give you a situation of what goes down there, church is almost not very important for people down there at all. They go to church on a Sunday, and that's pretty much it. Talking about spiritual growth, not very many people are seeking it. One thing I noticed about you guys here is that I was standing right here. I mean, half the time I'm leading worship, so I can't really hear everybody. But when I'm not leading worship, I stand in a crowd and I really don't hear people singing. They're just watching, they're just looking. But when I'm here, you guys are like echoing in my ears right behind. Maybe it's just this group right over there. It's probably not used to, because I know you're on the worship team. And you're there, but it was a female's voice, and I would assume that your voice is a little deeper. So, but they're no, they were loud, and you guys were all loud. Just worship your lungs, your hearts, your lungs, singing out, projecting. And I was hearing it, and I was like, wow, this is a different environment where I come from. Church over there, Christian camps, it's all about what I can be entertained about. And the desire for lusting after more. I mean, everywhere I go, I always hear kids talking about, I want those lucky jeans, or I want those 7 jeans, or I was getting this, new car. One of my students were like, yeah, if I get straight A's, my dad's going to buy me a Lexus. I'm like, what? I drive an old car, and you guys get a Lexus for just getting straight A's? Maybe some of you guys got that too. Lucky you. But, and these kids, once they get it, they want more. And they want more. And maybe those of you who have those cars, not to step on any toes, but might as well since I'm already not doing it. Maybe you want more. And maybe you want more. Whether it's clothes, whether it's money, whether it's prestige, whether it's value. When we stop thinking and putting God in the center, we always want more. And it's interesting that back then, almost 2,000 years ago, Paul writes about these things. He says it straight up, and it still applies to our generation today. Whoever says the Bible is irrelevant, better read this, because it's really relevant. So let's continue on with this. Verse 20, you, however, did not come to know Christ that way. Talk to people there. Surely you heard of him and were taught in him in accordance to the truth that is in Jesus. You were taught with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires. Again, it's talking about desires. It's never really ever talking about your past. But it says put off your old ways. Now when we came to Christ, when we became believers, we put off, or at least we're on the path. It's not like all of a sudden, boom, we're perfect Christians. It's a pathway. We start walking that way. Start turning around. To be made new, verse 23, the attitude of your minds, again mind, notice that, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in truth, righteousness, and holiness. This is our pursuit. Righteousness, holiness.